Daniel checked his phone for the fourth time in 10 minutes, pretending not to notice the sympathetic glances from the hostess near the entrance. The restaurant was warm and softly lit, with golden lights hanging like patient stars above polished wooden tables. It was the kind of place people came to celebrate anniversaries, promotions, or first dates that might turn into forever. Tonight was supposed to be his first date in 2 years. He had chosen the place carefully, scrolling through reviews for hours before settling on this quiet Italian restaurant downtown. He had even ironed his shirt, something he hadn't done since his sister's wedding. He wanted to look like someone who was ready to try again. At exactly 7:12 p.m., his phone buzzed. He smiled at first, thinking it was her saying she had arrived. But the message read, "I'm really sorry, something came up. I can't make it tonight." He stared at the screen. The words blurred slightly before sharpening again. He typed, "Is everything okay?" and waited. The three little dots never appeared. A minute later, another message came. "I just don't think I'm ready for this. I shouldn't have agreed. I'm sorry." That was it. Daniel placed his phone face down on the table. Around him, couples leaned toward each other, laughing softly. A man across the room slid a small velvet box across the table, and the woman gasped, covering her mouth. Daniel swallowed. He had told himself he wasn't expecting anything from tonight. It was just coffee and conversation, just a step, just proof that he could sit across from someone new without feeling like he was betraying the memory of the only woman he had ever loved. He considered leaving. It would be easy. Slip out, tell himself it didn't matter. But he had already ordered sparkling water. He had already told his mother this morning, "Yeah, I've got a date tonight." He had already let himself hope just a little. A soft voice broke into his thoughts. "Are you ready to order, or would you like a few more minutes?" He looked up. The waitress standing beside his table looked to be in her early 30s. Her dark hair was tied back in a low bun, and she wore a simple silver necklace that caught the light when she moved. Her name tag read Maya. "I'm actually waiting for someone," he said automatically, then paused. "Well, I was." Her expression shifted just slightly, not pity, understanding. "Oh," she said gently, "I'm sorry." "It's fine." He forced a small smile. "I think I'll just have the lasagna and maybe a glass of red wine." "Of course." As she walked away, Daniel exhaled slowly. He hadn't realized how tight his chest had been. He tried not to think about the last time he had sat at a restaurant like this. That night, the woman across from him had reached for his hand and said, "No matter what happens, we'll face it together." 6 months later, he was standing in a hospital hallway, listening to a doctor explain that sometimes, no matter how hard you fight, cancer still wins. He hadn't gone on a single date after that. Friends had tried to set him up. His sister had created a dating profile for him once, which he deleted within an hour. It was only recently that he had felt the ache change from sharp to dull, from unbearable to survivable. And tonight he had decided to try. When Maya returned with his wine, she set it down carefully. "On the house," she said quietly. "You don't have to." "I know," she replied with a small smile, "but sometimes it's nice not to have to." He nodded in thanks. Throughout the evening, she checked on him more often than necessary. Not in an intrusive way, just enough to make him feel less invisible. Once, when she refilled his water, she asked, "So, what would you have talked about tonight?" He let out a surprised laugh. "That's a strange question." "I ask strange questions," she said lightly. "Occupational hazard." He considered it. "I guess I would have told her about my dog. He's convinced he's human. And maybe about the time I tried to learn guitar during lockdown and nearly broke my neighbor's sanity." Maya laughed softly. "That sounds like a good start." "What about you?" he asked before he could stop himself. "What about me? What would you talk about on a first date?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second. I'd probably ask what makes them stay, not what makes them leave. Anyone can leave. I'd want to know what makes them stay when things get hard. Her words landed heavier than she could have known. He looked down at his plate. That's a good question. By the time he finished his meal, the restaurant had grown louder, fuller. He felt strangely calmer than when he had arrived. Disappointed, yes, but not crushed. Maybe that was progress. He asked for the bill. When Maya brought it, she placed it on the table with a soft, almost deliberate motion. "Thank you for not leaving," she said. He blinked. What? After the message, most people would have just walked out. He shrugged. I almost did. I'm glad you didn't. He reached for his wallet. Me too. When he stood to leave, he slipped on his coat and gave her a final nod. Thanks for the wine and the strange questions. Any time, she said. Outside, the night air was crisp. He shoved his hands into his pockets and walked toward his car. Halfway there, he remembered the receipt still folded in his hand. He unfolded it absent-mindedly. Beneath the printed total in neat handwriting was a short note. You showed up. That matters more than you think. He stopped walking. Below that, another line. The right person won't cancel when it gets real. And at the very bottom, smaller. Maya. Daniel's vision blurred. It wasn't the rejection that broke him. It was the recognition. For 2 years, he had been afraid to show up to dinners, to friends' gatherings, to the possibility of loving someone again. He had convinced himself that staying home was safer, that if he didn't try, he couldn't lose. But tonight he had shown up. He had ironed the shirt. He had walked into the restaurant. He had sat down even after the message came. And a stranger had noticed. Tears slipped down his cheeks before he could stop them. He laughed softly at himself, standing in a parking lot crying over a receipt. His phone buzzed again. For a split second, he thought it might be the canceled date changing her mind. But it was his sister. How did it go? He looked down at the note again. Then he typed back, it didn't, but I think I'm okay. He hesitated, then added, actually, I think I'm better than okay. He folded the receipt carefully and placed it in his wallet. The next Friday, he found himself back at the same restaurant. He almost turned around twice before walking in. Maya was carrying a tray of drinks when she spotted him. Surprise flickered across her face, followed by something warmer. Back again? She asked when she reached his table. Yeah, he said, trying not to overthink it. I realized I never answered your question. She tilted her head. Which one? What makes me stay? Her lips curved into a soft smile, and he took a breath. Someone who sees that I showed up. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The restaurant noise faded into a distant hum. Well, she said finally, setting down the tray, in that case, would you like to order, or would you like a few more minutes? This time, he didn't look at his phone. I'm not waiting for anyone, he said, unless you get off at 9. She glanced at the clock above the bar. I do. He smiled, feeling something unfamiliar but hopeful bloom in his chest. Then I can wait. And for the first time in a long time, waiting didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like the beginning.